Hello, and welcome to a bonus episode of Mortals and Portals. I am your host and GM, Zach, and joining me at the table is... I'm not really the GM today, so it kind of threw me off for a second, but I'm Zach.
Can I go now?
Yeah, go ahead.
I don't want to.
Adam.
Well, now they know. Fine, I'm
Sorry,
Adam.
I spoiled it.
Spoiler alert. Yeah, this whole episode is spoilers, technically.
No,
if
it's
you didn't
not.
watch every episode.
I won't-
prior.
Yeah, if you didn't
playing
watch,
Jules
if you didn't
today.
listen to any of the episodes.
If you
it's a
started
spoiler.
here, like, so we
Guys,
know
guys,
some of
we
our
gotta do the
listeners.
intro.
Oh, yeah. All right.
Take it away, Adam.
I already said it.
I didn't hear it. All right, whatever. Okay,
I'm
who's
Joel,
next?
and I play Joel. I'm Ryan. I also am Ryan.
Taryn.
That's it. Yeah, Taryn too. All right. Cool. Great. Well, that's probably a good teaser of just what the overall vibe of this episode is going to be, because this is not a regular episode. So you may have noticed the episode we released this week, episode 17, was a little bit shorter than usual. And the reason for that is that we as players and just like kind of out of game spent a lot of time like recapping lore and figuring out, you know, what items are important, what characters are important, what's happened so far, you know, what the characters' goals are. And although that's interesting stuff, you know, for us, we felt like it was very disruptive to the flow of the story and the episodes. We ended up cutting a lot of that. And then we realized, well, if we as players and GM and all that, who are probably more immersed in this story than anyone, needed that refresher, then the audience probably did as well, because it's a lot of, you know, made up words and characters and all these things. So we just thought, you know what we should do? We should release an episode where we all just sort of recap what's happened so far and, you know, what's at stake as we're gearing up for Dax and Waltz to head to Scale Keep and Jules to go save Ryu, and just all this lore that was dumped on Ryu and all that stuff. So yeah, this is kind of just like an open discussion, sort of like you would at your table when you take a pause in between turns and everybody is like, wait, who's who and what, why are we doing this? You know, so that's sort of what this episode is. Is everybody cool with that?
Yeah, let's
I'll
learn
allow
some
it.
stuff.
I always ask
Oh.
if you guys are cool with that kind of stuff, and you never say.
I thought you were asking the
Yeah.
audience.
We had already talked about this earlier. That we
Yeah,
were
we
cool
all
Yeah,
with.
that's
agreed,
true, yeah.
Zach.
We
Yeah,
all knew
that's
we
true.
were recording this
That is
today,
true.
Zach.
Yeah, you texted us, Zach.
Yeah.
All right,
We
you
talked
guys
about
just killed
this.
my vibe. I don't want to do this anymore. Screw you guys.
All right, thanks for listening.
All right, that's the bonus episode. Yeah. All right.
My opportunity as GM has come.
Ryan.
Ryan's up.
Ryan
Yeah, we have a
GM.
hierarchy.
go.
If at any point I just get fed up, Ryan, I just forward my notes
feel
and
like
he takes over.
I should definitely be at the bottom of that hierarchy for taking over as GM.
Well, it's all that like equity you build up by like not playing, and now you get a GM. You know what I mean?
right.
So-
I'm owed. All right.
So yeah, I guess just kind of starting from the beginning, we all recall that all of our characters arrived on this island called Nisserine via node. And the reason that is peculiar is that the node, well, technically nodes, because Jules arrived at a node in the sea, around Nisserine are
Oh.
almost never active and don't really align with other planets, to the point where everyone thought they were dormant, would never align again. So that in itself is very peculiar. And that in itself is obviously a story beat, because if you recall, when you guys linked up with Dunadast and told him about you all arriving via node, he was absolutely shocked by that. And he is not an expert on nodes, because that's typically reserved for astronomers, people that study the orbits of planets and predicting when they align. And he said that's certainly something worth diving into, discussing. But obviously in that moment, you guys were interrupted by the Drake Knights coming to town and so on.
Yeah, so we've done zero research into it.
Yeah, really haven't had any time for research. It's been pretty fast. And kind of extending to that even later on, and I think episode 8, I believe, when Waltz was in Dunadast's lab. And he was discovering that Waltz has some sort of divine power, as was hinted at by him illuminating the Sun Shard, which is an item from the planet of Dracus that is illuminated by the sun's radiation and stores its power. Anyways, Dunadast was like, hey, you guys all arriving here is very strange. You should all discuss amongst yourselves how you got here. Surely there's some commonalities, and maybe that can help us figure out what's going on. And obviously, that's something that's been hinted at in the origin episodes, and obviously we haven't done everybody's origin episode. We haven't done Jules and Dax yet, and you can see in both Ryu's and Waltz's origins, the way they were drawn to the node was peculiar in itself. They were guided there by various things. Walt saw his dad, and then Ryu had some sort of entity that he could sense in front of him that was kind of kiting him towards it. So both of you were lured to a very timely node that aligned with another node that has been dormant. So there's sort of that mystery there of all of you arriving at this same place at the same time. So that's kind of an underlying arc that's been going on.
I already have a question there.
Wow. Yeah, what is it, man?
So you said, and I
ahead,
don't know
Ryan.
if this is something that we're supposed to discuss in session, so you can decide whether or not you even want to say it right now, Zach.
Yeah.
But you said you only corrected yourself with nodes plural over node when you mentioned Adam being in a node at the sea. Are you saying that the rest of us were all at the same node when we came?
Yeah, and I don't mind discussing that. The three of you, like as in Ryu, Waltz, and Dax, all arrived on a node that is on Nisserine, like physically. And Jules, and Adam knows this from like his backstory, arrived at a node underwater. And that's why at the start of episode 1, he was walking out of the ocean onto land.
Sure.
So we
Gotcha.
all arrived at the same node, but at different times, right?
Must
Yeah,
have
so the
been.
other three of you all arrived at the same node, but at different times.
Got it.
Okay.
Got it.
Because otherwise we all would have saw each other immediately.
Yeah, you would have been like, hey,
Right.
immediately.
Right.
Yeah, because you're all from different planets, just different orbits. Obviously, like although potentially two nodes could align with the same node at the same time,
Right.
that could happen in theory. That's obviously not what happened here because you would have seen them, and that's something that Jules asked again as well in episode 4. And Dunadas was like, "Well, did you all arrive at this node at the same time?" And he was like, "Well, no." So, but you all
yeah.
arrived relatively close together, and yeah, so that in itself is very interesting. So that's something to investigate. And obviously, like, although Dunadas told Waltz, like, you guys should all talk about this, you haven't really had a chance to sit down and, like, recap that. But that's obviously something on the
Little
horizon.
busy.
Yeah. And if you recall, when Dunadas brought that up, Jules asked him if the phrase septum solus meant anything to him.
I do.
Yeah, so that's obviously something to do with Jules' origin story, and we will uncover that later, unfeld it.
Unfelled
Um,
already.
But that
Become
was
unfelded.
that question was triggered in Jules' mind from Dunadast, referencing you should consider how you got here and what happened. So yeah, you're all brought here under similar circumstances that are very unlikely, and Dunadast has also hinted at that in this universe, magic, some people believe it to have a mind of its own, has its own goals, and so on. So something perhaps is in play that is guiding you all to this point. And I don't really feel like that's a spoiler or anything. It's just kind of just some of the breadcrumbs that have been dropped, but what that is and why and what to do with that information hasn't been unfelded. So yeah, that's kind of how it all started. And then obviously you guys encountered some Drake Knights, and just some quick background on the Drake Knights. They're just these goons from all over Keldora. And if you don't know by now, because we drop a lot of names, Keldora is a solar system. So when I say Keldora, I'm referring to the entire realm that this campaign takes place in, a solar system of 7 planets that are all connected by these nodes. And when these nodes on different planets align, they create a link, and anyone standing on that node is transported to the other. So just stating that again. So these guys are from all over Keldora. They're kind of cast out from whatever clans they're part of, armies, whatever. They're criminals, just, undesirables. So that's why on this island there's been many different ancestries portraying Drake Knights. It's not just me like randomly picking them. It's just they're from all over Keldora. And they were, obviously had a heavy influence over the island of Nisserine, and basically were keeping these people in this town called Karos hostage, and they were basically serving the Drake Knights, supplying them with food. That's really their whole purpose, and they're not allowed to leave. And if anyone in Karos tries to leave via boat, because obviously the nodes aren't an option because they don't align, their boats are sunk by these drakes that are also on the island. And this island is ruled over by this magical spell that creates 3 distinct regions with 3 different climates, and each of these climates exist to be a habitat for a drake. So in the cold region of Pagos, you have the frost drake. In the normal season region of Enoch, you have a river drake. And then in the desert region of Gainmar, you have a desert drake. And this spell was distributed by a device called an Arcanor, which was made by Dunadast. And when he created the Arcanor, it's this device that channels the power of a ley line, which we'll talk a little bit more later. But this very magical, concentrated points in various places throughout Keldora that appear at random, maybe for reasons, who knows. And Dunadas wanted to put a ley line in an Arcanor to power a pre-programmed spell. And in his eyes, it was this experiment. And if you could do this in theory, then you could create spells that benefit people. You know, he hinted at, like, you know, protecting towns, like maybe some sort of force field, or like magically conjuring food for people, or creating perfect health, or all these things, you know. So that was his goal. And to bring this to life, he linked up with this druid named Sindor, who has kind of been the big bad of this arc. And Sindor knew a lot about primal magic and the ley lines, and he wanted to help Dunadas bring it to life. And Dunadas mentioned that he was having trouble creating the Arcanor in theory because he needed to create a recursive loop that made the ley line exist eternally, and every equation he did didn't work. And he mentioned in episode 4 that Sindor seemed to know the equation. He's like, hey, this is what you're missing, this is how you can make it. But Dunadas could tell that Sindor didn't understand the equation himself, meaning that, like, Sindor didn't come up with that. He got it from someone else. So that in itself is a bit of a mystery. Yeah.
Or something else.
Somebody else. Yeah. So Sindor.
Or something else.
Yeah,
Somewhat
something
else.
else,
Or
yeah.
Somewhere
somewhat
else.
Maybe
Some why.
any of the
Somehow
yeah.
else.
Who knows, man?
Yeah.
And some 20 years ago, Sindor and Dunadas arrived on Nisreen because there was a ley line, and they channeled the ley line successfully in Arcanor, but Sindor had kind of a sinister plan on what he wanted to do with it, and he created a spell that transformed Nisreen into those regions, and then also linked his power to the drakes that exist within the region. So he's artificially inflated with magical power from these drakes. And another thing he's doing on this island is shuttling drake eggs to and from it and supplying it to various factions around Keldora for who knows what. So he kept everyone in Karos to supply his Drake Knights that are protecting the drakes and shuttling the eggs and doing all this and that. And then he kept Dunadas in case anything bad happened to the Arcanor and he needed him to fix it. But other than that, everyone is a prisoner. And Sindor left. And we know a couple other things about Sindor from Waltz's origin story, if you recall. Waltz's father, Marlowe, who is from the planet Mortifar, that's the human homeworld. His father fought in a war in which they were trying to drive Sindor and a bunch of his abominations out of the forest of Aragod because he was doing all sorts of wicked magic. He was starting to form the Drake Knights. He had followers, and he was manipulating monsters to do his bidding. He was doing all sorts of horrible things, like creating fungus that released toxic spores that was like melting people from within. So they went on this big battle and drove him out of Aragod, but they didn't kill him, and he specifically said that. And then when his father returned and the whole army returned, they brought with them a plague, is what Marlowe believes. He feels like they brought it with them, and that's been something we've referred to as the Fade. So Waltz's kingdom of Billerod has endured the Fade, and although it hasn't been explicitly said, the Fade, the reason it's called that is when someone gets it, as the disease spreads throughout them, their body literally fades away. So his father, he's on crutches, and Waltz mentioned like a plague couldn't even kill him. The disease was spreading up his leg, and he amputated his leg, and that's why he was on crutches.
Baller.
Baller. Yeah, that's a hardcore
Did
dude.
he use a meat cleaver?
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, and then he served it.
Did he just
yeah.
plop his leg up on the butcher's chop?
Yeah. So, yeah, and that kind of brings us to Waltz a bit. So in his origin, he wanted to join the military because this plague and other things that happened on the planet of Mortifar made some of the more prominent kingdoms in Mortifar want to have complete control over the nodes on Mortifar so that they could monitor who is coming and going from the planet, because they feel the plague originated from off-world. And if it did come from Sindor or anything to do with that fight, Sindor was certainly from off-world. And some other things happened on the planet, not super relevant at this moment, but that is kind of the driving cause. So this alliance was formed, and the head kingdom in that is a kingdom called Eisenhelm. And Waltz wanted to join a fight on an island of Mandaru on Mortifar, which is this island in the center that has a bunch of nodes. So it's constantly aligning with other planets. So if they want to control nodes, that's a very important place to control. So Waltz went to Mandaru, and they needed to purge it of goblinoids from the Fangdom. And the Fangdom is from the planet of Desolus, where Rhea is from. We'll kind of get to that in a minute. But basically, Waltz's armies believed that these were invaders from the Fangdom trying to seize control of the nodes so that they could spread the Fangdom. So that's why he marched into that fight. And if you recall in Waltz's origin, when he killed that orc, the orc said, "At least I can die free," which sort of gave Waltz a puzzling dilemma to ponder. And something we've uncovered later throughout the story, just from Ryu talking to Bolgru, is that those goblinoids from the Fangdom on Mandaru, sorry to say so many made-up words, I hope people are still with me, are actually refugees, so people fleeing this empire. They don't want to be a part of the empire, so they flee it, and Mandaru is important to them because it has so many nodes, so it enables them to escape. So from these goblinoids' perspective, they're fighting off these human kingdoms so that they can protect the ability for their friends to escape the Fangdom back on Desolus. So they're fighting for what they believe is a very noble cause to allow people to flee the Fangdom, and then Waltz's people think they're fighting for a noble cause to monitor the control, like monitor nodes. And maybe this could be cleared up with some sort of diplomatic discussion. So even that in itself is a bit of a mystery. Like, does Waltz's kingdom know that they're refugees? Do they truly think they're from the Fangdom and have ill intent? What's going on there? So there's sort of that gray area as well. So that's kind of something else to maybe look into.
It sounds like the only solution is for Waltz's people to build a wall to keep them from being able to come in.
Yeah, but like, where do you do that?
They
like
need a
around the
leader.
node?
Well, they need a leader like Tantu. That guy's got the right.
They do.
Too bad
For sure.
Tantu's
Here we go.
no more.
I don't know how or where they'll build it, but I know the Fangdom's going to pay for it.
Couldn't they just enclose the node in a wall, like a total tower, so anybody that comes in can't get out?
Sure.
All right.
Maybe, man. Yeah, you guys can ask a bunch of node questions when you get to someone who knows things about nodes, and you can ask them like, "What if you just built a wall around it?" And they'll tell you. But
I also had a question about something that you mentioned earlier, Zach, and I don't know. I don't want us to stray too far.
No, you're good. No, please interrupt
Go
me,
ahead,
so I'm
Ryan.
not just spewing. I would like a pause, but
Go ahead, Ryan.
What are nodes?
all right, bye, Adam. Shoot him.
When,
All right, thanks for having me.
when you're talking about Dunadas, it's like
I don't know why I thought that was so funny. Thanks for having me. See you later.
when you were talking about Dunadas lore dump on us, you said that he wanted to use the Arcanor for like sinister things. Did Dunadas tell us what those sinister things were, or do we know?
Well, what he said was that he didn't know Sindor was planning to do sinister things with it. So when the time came, they got the ley line in there, and they're like, "Hey, good job, we did it." Sindor's like, "But watch this," and then unleashed his spell that transformed Nisserine and linked him to the power of the Drakes.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah,
Lame.
And
It's
Dunadas
not very
didn't know
cash
that.
money of him.
yeah, it's not cash money at all.
For real, for real.
Very random phrase to throw out there, but I love it.
I will jot
Yeah.
that down and throw in my own vocabulary, Joel. Thank you.
So as we're talking about the Fangdom and ley lines, cutting over to Ryu and kind of what we learned from his origin story. So a totally different perspective of the Fangdom. So from Ryu's perspective, as a member of this small nomadic warrior clan of the Erikai that is constantly hunted and pursued by the Fangdom, they are nothing but evil, militaristic, brutal, and just throughout the Erikai's all their known history, they've been fighting the Fangdom, and they're greatly outnumbered. And one of the ways that they tried to bolster their strength so they can fight the Fangdom is through this ceremony called an awakening, where they channel the power of a ley line using this special sword they have that they call a kenoshi. It's made out of a special material, and when the ley line contacts it, it kind of transforms it as a conduit and then enables the Erikai to draw from it and unlocks magical abilities. So that's what Erikai are constantly training for. And as if you recall from Ryu's origin episode, it's by no means a guarantee. First of all, not every Erikai has the skill set to attempt it. And even if they can attempt it, not all of them can survive it.
You could straight up explode.
Yeah, Tantu exploded. There was a good,
I've seen
someone
it.
had like a fan theory on what happened to Tantu in our Discord, that like he was actually teleported to like another dimension or realm and he'll actually be back. But he's missing his
I
feet.
missed that.
Yeah, he's missing his feet though, so yeah. Because Taryn's like, I can't wait to hear how Zach brings Tantu back, you know? So someone was like, well, I know how Zach can bring it back. He gets teleported or something.
When
So-
you go through an awakening, you either lose your sight or you lose your feet, it would seem.
You don't need feet where we're going.
we don't need feet, bro.
He just flies now. Whee!
Yeah. So, and, you know, so this is after episode 17. So also, before Ryu even awakened, he had this profound moment where he just saw his father had died, and he was being approached by soldiers from the Fangdom, and then his Erikai brethren jump in and start to defend him, but they're going to die. And then Ryu, like, blacks out. And the only hint of what happened is that he sees these long horns, this shadow on the sand, protruding back to his original sized horns. And he was holding a bloody sword, and like all these Fangdom soldiers are dead. And his mentor Vish like can't believe it. And then Vish personally oversees his training, and that's kind of Ryu Origin Part 2, where he goes through the awakening and fails the awakening. So something interesting happened when he tried to channel the ley line that didn't happen to everybody else, where it kind of the entire ley line formed into like this ball and then struck him. Everyone else was just like siphoning from it, but Ryu seemed to try and take on the entire ley line, and it exploded. He woke up and he was blind, and his
you'll have that.
Yeah, his enemy, the rival, whatever you want to call him, Jin, told him he failed, and Trick, and that he was blind, and that Vish was disappointed and left him, and now Ryu's exiled because he failed his awakening, and just gave him a sword and whatever. So then Ryu shamefully had to go wander the desert of Desolus. He passed out in the sand and was contacted by some sort of entity that was very powerful. It was like overwhelming his mind. He was realizing he could sense auras and thoughts and things like that, and it was overwhelming for him. And this entity told him, like, you can't give up. I was beginning to think you'd ever show, like, too much is at stake. You could be the greatest Irokai yet. And that gave Ryu the drive to continue going. He, through a sandstorm, encountered some sort of other entity that was kiting him towards this node. He ended up on this node, fought off some goblinoids, and then the node aligned, and that's how he got to Nisserine. So it's kind of some mystery going on with like who confronted him and why was his awakening different and so on. And going back to Nisserine, so now that we know that there's like two perspectives of the Fangdom, and then we go back to Nisserine, you guys obviously encountered some Drake Knights on the road, got into a fight, made enemies, and then went back to Karos, and then they showed up to Karos looking for you, and then even brought a Drake along. That's where our boy Digsby, we lost your boy.
Don't bring him up.
R.I.P.
Yeah, but you guys killed Rhaegorn the Drake, and that's kind of what set this whole thing in motion. So Dunedass was like, look, you guys started something like, this is our best shot we've ever had to like overthrow him.
Right.
They're gonna show up for vengeance. If you ever want off this island, like, you either gotta sail and the Drakes won't let you do it, so you gotta defeat the Drakes. Like, there's nothing else we can do. So if you want off this island, even if you don't care about us, like, this is what you gotta do. But obviously you guys are heroic and you're like, all right, let's do it. So that's what started this whole thing. So you had that new companion Geldir, which was this Drake Knight that Waltz kept repeatedly knocking out in like 2 different fights and was still alive. He ended up kind of teaming up with you guys, with his own motives, and was going to guide you to Pagos to kill Forgost, because your plan was like, let's kill all of the Drakes that are linked to Sindor to weaken Sindor, and then we'll fight Sindor at Scale Keep, which is like the hub of the Drake Knights. And your other option was to just go straight to Scale Keep, try and find the Arcanor, which was powering the spell, and like destroy it, like turn it off, whatever, and then that would also weaken Sindor. But you guys didn't really like your odds of like going into Scale Keep and maybe all the Drakes show up and Sindor's there, and it's just like too hard, so you decided to kind of go the methodical approach. And before you left Benjamin, he also gave you another out that you could use. He gave you like this flare, and he said if you shoot this flare into the air, I'll hop in my ship with my boys and we'll go out to sea, and any Drakes that see us will fly out to try and stop us, so we'll lure some Drakes away from you. So that's another thing you have at your disposal. So you headed out, and then you went to Pagos, and immediately when you crossed the threshold of Pagos, like, Ryu kind of started transforming. He had like black hair now, and his voice is different, his demeanor was a little different.
Because tonight will be the night that I will fall for you.
Over again.
It does have black hair
Dad.
too. Raw XD.
Oh my god.
Where are you?
Yeah. He's got like black fingernails. Like, suddenly he has like a MySpace. It's just like super blinged out. It's awesome. Anyways,
I just kind of want to do that for a while. I kind of want to keep rambling off lines of really punk songs.
Yeah, what else we got?
Man, whatever happened to punk music? It just like all went away at the same time,
Dude, haven't you heard of Machine Gun Kelly?
Oh my gosh.
That dude's punk as hell.
Yeah. Anyway.
That felt gross coming out of my mouth.
Anyway.
It felt gross. Yeah. So you're in Pagos. You're trying to find Forgost. You know, Geldir's kind of giving you the runaround. You're kind of trying to figure out what his motives are. And you encounter Clag, who is a native of Pagos, and he is an ice mephit and can only exist there because Sindor created it. So he refers to Sindor as father. So this is like another thing you guys need to consider if you shut off this spell. These climates and all these creatures that are acclimated to it will no longer be able to survive in them. So, you know, that kind of sucks, you know?
Okay, well, you don't have to bring that up.
Yeah.
What
Yeah.
not there to consider? There's
Yeah,
two.
We don't have to worry
well-
about Clag surviving anymore.
Yeah.
Why is that, Joel?
Yeah, so Clag showed up and he was, you know, wanted apples and whatever, and you guys convinced him to take you to Forgost. He seemed to know where he was. And he guided you there, and, well, he did take you to Forgost, like you asked. So maybe it was all just a big misunderstanding. Yeah, he triggered, well, you guys triggered this trap that opened a little, like, wormhole portal thing to Forgost's lair, and Forgost came out, started jacking you guys up, and took out Ryu, and then picked Ryu up
again?
and flew away with him. So it seemed like he wanted to grab Ryu. Took him back into his lair, and then the portal closed. And then you guys got all mad at Geldir, and you're like, where the heck where did he take him? He's like, oh, I took him to Forgost's lair. I can take you there, you know, sort of thing. And you're like, well, what the heck? I thought you couldn't take us there. He's like, oh, yeah, I can. And he started communicating with Dax in secret speech, which is this, you know, things that, like, thieves can use to speak in secret.
Yeah.
And he told Dax that Clag was spying for Sindor, basically. So Dax, you know, did the dirty and killed him.
Took out the trash.
Took out the trash, yeah. So he
Dabasuda.
just stabbed Clag in the back of the throat or whatever. Killed him. Gelder's like, good job, mate. And yeah, so now you're free to walk and do your thing.
I just realized also Ryu still doesn't know. I know we're jumping ahead, but Ryu also doesn't know that Clag's not part of the group either.
Oh yeah, where's Clag? Yeah, that's a good point.
Oh,
Yeah,
about
so,
that.
Yeah, so then you guys wanted to go get Ryu, so you went to Forgost's lair. Pretty much came up with a plan to like drop some boulders on him and whatnot.
Who came up with that
Yeah,
plan?
Gelder came up with
Who's
that
this
plan.
we you speak
Yeah,
of?
Gelder came up with that plan. You guys are like, sweet. Oh, also along the way,
We
you
were
got
not
this
like
hippogriff.
sweet.
You found this hippogriff that was being sworn by wolves. Wolves.
Whoops.
Whoops.
And this was the same hippogriff you found like episodes before that you tried to, you know, you did free it, but it like ran off and it ended up in Pagos somehow. So now you have this hippogriff that you guys named Smith, which is spelled SCZMYTH. So it's super fantasy-esque. It's not a bland name. Don't even think it is.
Is there an E at the end of it too?
There could be, yeah, dude. Any letter that you can cram in there
yeah, I
that
don't
can
know.
still maintain the pronunciation, it's there.
I want to know who this Granny Smith was originally that came up with the apples.
I don't know.
In
Maybe
this
I'll put her in
lore,
the story. Yeah, I should
Yeah.
do that.
Or
Yeah.
him.
And then so meanwhile, Ryu was being taken by these Drake Knights, so he ended up in Forgost's lair and he was surrounded and they took him captive and they took him on this long wagon ride, and during this wagon ride Ryu was talking with this Drake Knight commander named Bulgur, who was a hobgoblin from Desolus who defected from the Fangdom. So Ryu initially is like, oh, you're from the Fangdom, I hate you. And then basically, like, kind of over time, Bulgur explained, like, dude, I don't like the Fangdom either. That's why I left. That's why I'm actually fighting for Sindor, because Sindor is using his drakes to aid the refugees on Mandaru. Without the drakes, they wouldn't be able to win. And if you recall in Waltz's origin story, when the camp of his soldiers got overrun by these goblinoid refugees, they were riding drakes, and that's what turned the tide of battle. So it seems to be working. And so Bulgur was proud to fight for Sindor, because without Sindor, the rebels would fail and they wouldn't be able to escape the Fangdom. So as you can see, things are starting to get a little complicated here. What was that turn?
Yeah.
I was going to say, so just to clarify, the goblins and orcs, right? Goblins or goblinoids that I was fighting were not the actual Fangdom. Those were all refugees. And they were fleeing from whatever
The
planet
Fangdom.
they were on. But like I didn't know that, and we didn't know that. Or like
Yeah,
at
so
least
you
most
were
of the
fed
humans didn't know
information
that.
from your kingdom that this is the Fangdom invading. Go take them out, you know?
When really it was people fleeing the Fangdom, and they just are the same demographic as them.
Yep. pretty
Yeah, I
much.
think technically only Ryu knows that right now because Bulgur and Sindor basically
Right.
explain
Yeah.
that to him.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, you know, maybe now at that point, Sindor's not seeming so bad. And this is kind of like a theme that, like, I think as we uncover the rest of this and we kind of talk about it for a second, that like I enjoy in storytelling where it's like there isn't like if you do this you're doing the right thing, and if you do this you're doing the wrong thing. It's like if you do this you're doing the right thing from this perspective, but also maybe like harming this, you know? So it's like Sindor may be evil, as we're like uncovering. If you kill Sindor, do the refugees not have drakes anymore and they can't fight, and then no one can escape the Fiengdom? I don't know.
Yeah.
Who knows?
And we don't
If
even
you
really,
take-
we don't, I was going to say, we don't really know like how big the Fiengdom is.
Yeah.
I think Waltz has like very seldom heard the word Fiengdom. I think maybe Ryu is the only one that like really understands what they are. I don't even really understand what they are.
Well, Waltz would know, at least in the sense from what like his kingdom told him about like who they are and the threat they pose. So yeah, you'd be aware of that. Yeah, so it's not super cut and dry.
Yeah, the decisions you make us do give me anxiety because it's almost like the people that we're fighting also had to make similar decisions like that, but we're considering them the bad guys.
Mm-hmm.
But then once we make those decisions, are we bad guys?
Oh yeah, to some people for sure.
Yeah, we're bad guys to somebody for sure.
The Drake Knights probably.
Yeah, and also like, you know, why would Sindor want to do this sort of thing? Is it just for good reasons? Is it not? So maybe he does need to be stopped, but like what he was doing, what he was helping maintain, maybe still needs to be supported in some way.
Right.
You know, like maybe a new person needs to be in the driver's seat sort of thing, you know? Who knows?
Yeah, maybe we still support the refugees, just take Sindor out of the equation, something like, you know. And
Maybe,
tricky.
yeah. This information is obviously scattered amongst the characters and even separated,
Right.
so it's sort of something that would need to be discussed, but
But also, what are nodes?
But why male models?
Yeah. So Ryu's kind of learning these other things and like sees that Bulgur is proud to fight for Sindor. Then they arrive in this city called Kuripan, which is like an export city where they shuttle the Drake eggs to and from the island, and they load him on the ship, you know, as a prisoner. And then we cut back to the party. You know, they're fighting Forgost. They push the boulder on him, does some damage, and then Waltz. Well, let me back up just a moment. Just before this fight, Geldir gave Waltz a letter that he wanted him to give to his daughter in case Geldir died. And Geldir basically told you that he also experienced the same like plague that Waltz did on the elf homeworld of Lorthal. The elves were immune to it, but his wife was human, and his wife got it from people fleeing the plague, basically the Fade, to the elf homeworld. And he wanted to make her better. He heard tale of like this thing, like an elixir that could maybe make her better, and he didn't have enough money for it, so he stole from a nobleman, bought the elixir, it didn't work, wife died. And then so he got caught for stealing and was put on the chopping block, and like Sindor basically saved him and took him away so that he had to be a Drake Knight. So he never got to tell his daughter like where he went, and he hasn't been able to get back to her because he's been stuck on Nisserine and, you know, fighting for the Drake Knights. So he's like, if I die, can you make sure this gets to my daughter, and I'll explain to her like everything that's happened. And Waltz is like, yeah, man, I can do that. And then fast forward back to the pushing the boulders. Waltz turns around after the boulder barely did any damage, tries to get on the hippogriff, but then Geldir shoves him in there. He shoves him into the lair. And so he...
Oh, I know. I was there.
Yeah, you remember that? Yeah.
I wasn't, but I remember it.
Yeah. So, you know, interesting, you know, like why would Geldir do that, you know? Give you the letter and say, like trust you with it, but then try and kill you. You know what I mean? Is it all just to like smoke and mirrors, like lower your guard? Who knows? So he does that. Anyway, you guys defeat Forgost using Dunadash's pistol, and it was very, very hard. You definitely like almost died, and if you just missed the pistol shot, it pretty much would have been all over. And now you don't even have Geldir to help you out. Not that he helped anyway. You didn't have Ryu.
I don't think he ever helped us.
Yeah, I think
In fact,
almost
he
every
hurt
fight I
us.
forgot he was there. Yeah, that kind of kept happening. Yeah.
I don't know what you mean by barely survived. I had literally full hit points at the end
Yeah,
of
it's
that.
true. You're in the corner just throwing nets like 30 feet short. Yeah, I'm
Well,
sure he would have
somebody's
survived a
gotta
long
do it.
time once he finished off Jules and looked at you like, oh crap, take this net.
Would have been fine.
I'm contributing. Well,
Yeah,
you
so this-
contributed more than Ryu, I guess.
And I help.
Yeah. So, you know, that all happened, and then that episode also ended with Ryu on the ship in the jail, and Sindor lands on the ship on a drake, comes down with Bulguru, asks Bulguru where Ryu's sword is. He's like, I don't have a sword, because Jules has it. And then Sindor gets really mad, just like rips Bulguru in half, kills him, you know? And that's kind of where we ended that episode. And then so when we started that episode, this is the episode that was really short, and this is like why we're kind of making this bonus episodes, because we were trying to figure out like, you know, what the characters are going to do next, you know? And, you know, so basically it kind of boiled down to like, well, if you tried to go fight the Desert Drake, Desmar, which is even more powerful, you have to like go all the way to Gainmar and find him. And if you did that without Ryu, you probably don't stand a chance. And to go get Ryu and then go to Desmar would take a long time, and it would give Sindor like all the time in the world, and maybe not even worth trying to fight this Desert Drake. So it kind of came down to like, well, we could try and get the Arcanor and, you know, destroy it, turn it off, whatever, and just shut the spell off, because you happen to be in a cave with 2 tunnels, and one of them leads straight to Scale Keep. And so it's the most direct route you're going to get, really. So Dax and Waltz decided to do that, but then someone needed to get Ryu, and just through like logical deduction and all that that's kind of covered in the episode, they realized that Ryu was probably at sea, and the only way to catch him was by flight with Smith, and Smith obviously can't carry all 3 of you, and Jules is an expert on ships and all things nautical adventures, so he said, I'll do it. So he got on Smith and flew after Ryu. So then Ryu, confronted by Sindor, and Sindor did a big old lore dump on you, and basically said, that the Erikai are actually from another planet called Kaijin, which is outside of Keldora. And the way they got to Keldora, along with many other organisms and entities, is through this event called the Displacement that happened thousands of years ago, where just a bunch of like people in Keldora suddenly like disappeared, no one knows where they went, and then a bunch of people, entities, organisms that weren't in Keldora were suddenly in Keldora. So like timeline-wise, like in the history of Keldora, which I won't like go over now, that was like that age was called the Age of Displacement, because it's set back like advancement like 1,000 years, because just like all these kingdoms that were getting established, suddenly like kings are gone and like important figures are gone, and now there's these new entities here that are like maybe more powerful or whatever, and just a lot of conflict broke out. It just derailed a lot of things, and the Erikai were one of those groups of people, and they were called the Kaisetsu from the planet Kaijin. And I should also mention that it's not really clear how this event happened, like what caused the displacement. There's a lot of theories, and I'm sure throughout the story you'll find out some. But yeah, so basically the Kaisetsu Erikai arrived on Desolus, and there's a bunch of clans. The Fangdom hadn't formed yet, and there's all these goblinoid clans, and they were, you know, just fighting with one another. And the Erikai were like outstanding warriors and in this foreign place, and instantly found themselves at odds with these clans and started fighting them. And basically these clans realized that they weren't gonna be able to destroy the Erikai, and this leader within them called Faramgor sought out the help of a crone, like this very powerful witch, which Sindor says like, pray you never meet her, so powerful. He doesn't even consider it an option to kill her, and you know how powerful Sindor is. So Faramgor found this crone and basically sold his soul to her in exchange for like the power to like control Desolus and create this Fangdom, this empire, and ensure that the Erikai do not defeat them. So this curse happened, and basically Sindor is explaining like through the words of the curse he can tell like what it caused and what conditions can break it. So basically it caused all the Kaisetsu Erikai to forget where they came from, like what their origins are. So they don't know what planet they're from and all that, and all they know is they've just only ever known Desolus. And they became tieflings because they're cursed, so that's where the horns are from. And they were never to defeat the Fangdom. They were to always be oppressed. They would be bound to Desolus, never able to leave Desolus. So they're just caught in this endless feud that they cannot win. But there is one condition in which they can win, and that's through the appearance of an Erikai known as the Unbound. And let me just start right here and say that this is not a Chosen One situation. This is not Ryu getting like plot armor if he is the Unbound. Because basically what the curse says is there will be this Unbound, and that's the only chance to win, not the Unbound will show up and win. So whoever this Unbound is could still die, could still fail. But this Unbound person was said to have dormant power, so clue number one that it could be Ryu is this thing he did as a kid where he killed all these goblinoids, and they will leave Desolus and return, and Ryu is the only Erikai to have left Desolus. And the third is that
They have a thirst for coffee.
they love coffee and they fart all the time. Well, if it's fart all the time, it could be any of the Erikai, so that's not inconclusive. But and the last is that they can channel the power of a ley line. And right when Sindor said that, you know, Ryu was like, all Erikai, proud strong warriors can channel ley lines, and he's like, no, you're completely wrong. Like your help me out, Rio. What's the
Modachi?
made up word? Yeah, Kenoshi.
Oh, dang it.
Your Kenoshi is what channels the ley line. It's made of this special material, and then it like distributes it to the warrior, kind of like in this siphoned conduit fashion. And the Unbound can literally just channel the power straight into their body. So if you recall, when Ryu tried to channel the ley line, something different happened, and it was just like too much and exploded. And basically, Sindor's saying like that was you trying to channel the ley line directly, and you failed. But I can help you do it, and if I help you do it, you can defeat the Fangdom. Like you're the key to defeating the Fangdom. So you want to do that? And Rio's like, well, yeah, I would love to defeat the Fangdom. He's like, well, cool. I'll go get your sword, and you and I can go do that together, and then I'll just kill your friends real quick because they're like messing up my stuff, and then we'll go do that. So from Rio's perspective, that doesn't necessarily sound like, other than killing your friends, like, well, yeah, if you're gonna help me defeat the Fangdom, that'd be great. So kind of also getting into some gray area of like, why not join him? Is he that bad? But also, if he wants the same thing as me, is it the wrong thing to do to destroy the Fangdom? Am I inadvertently doing something I shouldn't be doing? And so on. And
yeah, I'm still turning that stuff over in my head, trying to figure out, what's the worst option to choose.
And are we even that good of friends to Ryu? Like, does Ryu even like
I'm
us?
interested to see that, like how much Ryu values that, because he's
Did kinda
said,
just
Ryan,
me.
what your goals are.
Yeah, Ryu's kind of a jerk to us sometimes.
Yeah, real gurk. That's what I've been thinking a lot about too, is like what I kind of explained in the episode was Ryu just here more by happenstance, and sure, he met these people that he's been working with, but he's got goals beyond Nisserine, so
Which makes sense.
yeah, gotta figure that out.
Join the dark side.
Yeah, it could be on the dark side after this. We might have to actually bring in Honk to replace Ryu.
Do it.
I can't wait till Honk shows up.
Me too, Zach. I can't wait
I
to find out what you
did
do.
promise Ryan that I would make a goose character for him when he tried to make Honk. So I guess
It's
I kinda
literally
have to do
on
that.
tape. Yeah.
Sindor's going to be like, finally, Ryu, we can take over the world. And Honk's going to be like, not so fast. Honk.
Honk. Honk.
And there stands
Yeah.
a goose.
But not just any goose.
Yeah. So that's kind of what's at stake so far and why they've decided to do what they're doing. So we'll see how that unfolds, what new information comes out, what characters decide to do when they link up, and all that stuff. And I'm sure I forgot some things, but yeah, so that's kind of just like a big old lore dump bonus episode of recapping the stuff you've listened to. Because I know you listen to these things like once a week, and just like I know, like as a player, even like when you play D&D like once a week, you're like have to ask your GM like, wait, do I know this guy, or like why does this matter, or like what should I be doing, or what do I know, what don't I know? So I imagine like as listeners that can kind of become overwhelming at times, especially when it's all like made up stuff anyway. So yeah, we'll try and do this kind of thing like every now and then, I think, just to kind of recap some stuff. So
What if we did a spoiler-free Reddit ask your lore questions thing?
Yeah, I would love to do all that kind of stuff if anyone, we could totally set that up. I'd be sad if I like set it up and like no one asked any, but that's fine. I'll just make my own like ghost accounts and like ask myself questions.
Right.
Yeah,
Funny.
cool. Yeah, there's all your lore for now, and we'll see you next time, mortals.
But what are nodes?